Lawyers, lies, and late night fights. We've been through it all, and we came out stronger. Hi, everybody. We are Mike and Brenda Baker, and today we are talking about your marriage can survive the courtroom. Ours did.
So, court orders, we've had a lot of questions about court orders and whatnot, and I want to make sure that I'm very clear. This is not about court advice. We are not lawyers. We are not legal representation. We are not judges. We're not lawmakers. We're not giving legal advice. We're simply giving relationship advice based on 30 years of our successful blended family marriage. So keep that in mind.
Helping others too.
Yes, exactly. But we want you to know what we did, because there are a lot of you that have been asking questions about court orders, and some very specifically recently, and we wanted to do this video for you guys. So you need to understand that the court's going to stick its nose where it doesn't belong. And typically that's driven by a vengeful ex or an angry ex or whatever adjective you want to put in there about your ex. That's not up to me. So the point is, we were both put on the stand at one point over an issue that my ex said she had, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I will say it was something that she never had a problem with before that. So I was asked on the stand that if a doctor told me this, that, and the other, what would I do? And I said, well, because I'm a Christian, this was my moment of truth. I always heard about moments like this, never thought it would actually be me. And so here I was facing the possibility of losing the kids over false allegations. And I said, I would do whatever Scripture told me I should do because I trust God more than I trust the doctors. Now, luckily that day, we did not lose the boys. We had visitation at that point reinstated. So what was the point? Well, we had to agree to some things after that. We were kind of pushed into, almost forced to agree to some things after that we didn't necessarily agree with ourselves. But here's the question you got to ask yourself. Is this a salvation issue? Mm-hmm. All right. So to lie on the stand about something I felt very strongly about was a salvation issue. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%.
But compromising on what I needed to do to make sure that the boys were actively in my house where I could teach them about God, that was not as much a salvation issue. And someday I might tell you the funny story about what happened after that. But anyway, so the point here is the court is going to stick its nose in. Sometimes it sticks its nose way in. You can see your child, but your child can't see your new spouse. I would press that one if I was you. That sounds like, once again, not legal advice, sounds like overreach. See, the one thing that you want to keep in mind is, as we live with court orders and court intrusion, do we want to be in a position, when you're standing in front of God, do you want to explain, or even to your kids, do you want to explain to them that you just didn't have the money to fight it, or that you fought it with everything you had? Because this is a marriage, and you guys both got to be in on that.
Right. And another thing that I really want you guys to know is that we always tell people, if you have the choice between getting along with your, in your co-parenting with your ex and going to court, we will 100% always tell you, figure it out with your ex. Do not go to court. Mm-hmm. Court is always going to be against Christians, period. End of story. We've seen it over and over again. We knew some people a long time ago who had some children that they adopted, and they got raked through the coals for doing zero, nothing wrong. They were loving, they were awesome. It's so infuriating watching people go through some of the things that we've gone through, just because an ex or in-laws want to find some dirt on you. So we will always tell you to work it out with your ex. Make some sacrifices. Agree to some things that you don't 100% agree with to keep the peace between you and your ex-spouse. Because here's the thing. The kids are the one that take it from both sides. Plus, they have to be interviewed, and all sorts of things can transpire between psychologists and counselors and psychiatrists. you can get into such a money pit, but also such an emotional turmoil situation. It's not worth it. So, as much as you can, try to work it out with the ex. Go to mediation. Um, Go to things and talk through some of these things, because sometimes, a lot of times actually, what happens is emotions go up and people get angry, and then they're like, "Oh, you're not going to do that to me." And here's the problem. It doesn't matter. The little thing becomes this huge mountain of problems that doesn't need to be there. You didn't have to, get stubborn, get curious. We tell you that with your spouse, your now spouse. Get curious, but also with your ex-spouse, if you have any shred of a relationship, try with everything in your being to work with them, work it out with them, try to give, try to be understanding. If the kids say something, ignore it unless it's abuse, true abuse. Ignore it. It doesn't matter what they're saying about you. It doesn't matter what they're saying about your spouse. You want to protect them. Yeah, I get it. But we have learned the hard way many times that don't go to court, because court will always be in the non-Christian spouse's, ex-spouse's
Favor.
corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, things to keep in mind. When emotions go up, stupidity rises right alongside it. Okay. And so we say things and do things we don't mean. Now, for a long time, Brenda wondered why I put up with the stuff from my ex that I did. And it was to keep visitation. Now, I am not suggesting for 2 seconds that you not defend yourself in that type of situation, that you just have to take it all the time, but you have got to pick your battles wisely.
Yeah.
If he or she is just chattering on when you pick up the kids about how you don't do this and you don't do that, that stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You need to be like a duck and let it roll right off your back. So that brings us to point number 2. Okay, point number 2 is what's changed and what hasn't changed. Well, what's changed is that now you've got this bug in your ear that you feel like you can't ever get rid of.
Yeah.
And with a court order, there may be some things that they've instituted within your household that you just got to deal with. Worst thing, okay, what hasn't changed? You're still married. You still had vows. You still said, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part, right? For better or for worse. You're looking at worse. You've heard me say it again. Nobody at the altar thinks to themselves, I wonder what worse looks like, because everything's all flowers and moonlight, And, well, now you're looking at it. So if you start taking it out on your spouse, that's your fault.
Yeah.
If your spouse starts taking it out on you, their fault. If they take it as a personal affront and you won't stick up for them, there are so many more things in play here. This is where traditional marriage leaves the room and blended marriage comes in. But let me tell you, you have to remember that it is still a marriage. The parts of traditional marriage that make marriage strong still apply here. You can't just wipe it away. You can't just ignore it. Your spouse is still your spouse. If you married that spouse and you knew they had kids from another person, on you. That is on you. You made a choice, thought you could make it work. I've heard that before. Well, I thought I could make it work. You can make it work. You need to stop pretending that it's always going to be the same every day. It's not. And I'm going to say it straight up. Typically, it's the ladies who think that they're just going to they're going to be kind, they're going to be nice to the ex-wife. And I can count on one hand how many times out of hundreds, how many times I've seen that actually happen.
Yeah.
As one good example is I knew a barista, very nice young lady. She told me that her and her ex-spouse's new wife got along great. They shared things about the kids. They would even have a drink together. And then it happened. I told her, I said, well, that's great. This was before. I told her that's great. It is possible. It's just highly unlikely. I said, this is what I've seen before. 1 month later, the things I said I had seen before came for her. And it was sad because she had to really take a step back and realize that this person she thought she could trust wasn't. She couldn't. And it was the new wife in this case. It's not always the case. No. But here's the deal with court orders. Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. Do do not put the marriage on the back burner.
Yeah. And when it comes to, this was another part of a question that we got that talked about how do you take your faith and continue in your faith without it affecting your marriage or affecting your co-parenting. And what I would say to that is it's really important to remember that you're here to raise these children to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
That needs to be your number one goal. Now, it's really easy to get to be putting out all these different fires all the time. But the problem is that when you're on defensive mode, that, let's talk about sports for a minute. Any sport that anyone has ever played, so whatever you've played, is it better to be on the defense or the offense? Well, it depends on the sport, yes. But when it comes to this, it is better to have some strategy and think of what might happen prior to, and then plan for that. A military term that they always told us was, expect.
What? I thought it was the big old hug.
Oh, now I can't remember it. I think it was something like, expect the worst, plan for the best.
Yeah,
Or no, opposite.
Plan for the worst, no, you're right. Expect the worst, plan for the best.
Yeah. Anyways, the whole point is things are going to come up when your soldier's gone. Same thing here. It's very, very similar in the fact that when you can least afford it is when something's going to happen with the ex and there's going to be something you have to do with money, right? But you don't have to go to court. So like I said before, no matter what, try to work things out, apologize, even if the thing wasn't really your fault. And I'm never going to tell you to lay down, but there are times that I can look back, with his ex-wife, and I can think of actually quite a few times where I got stubborn and I was like, I'm not doing that. So I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm not doing that. And it was mostly because I felt like I couldn't do anything right anyways. Well, that was on me. So we're never going to tell you to go away from what you believe is right. But we are going to tell you, and Mike said this before, use a whole lot of discernment and wisdom anytime you're going to deal with your ex, because it's going to have a cascading effect. And it's really important that you keep the households as calm and collected as possible. Keep the emotions out of it. Wait before you return another text. I had a situation this past week where it wasn't with an ex, but it was with someone who came over and did something for us that we were paying, and I was unhappy with the way it got done because the person did not listen to what I wanted. They did it their way instead of doing what I wanted as the customer. Okay? I know myself well enough to know that I do not call people right back at all because I was already upset about it, and in this stage of my life especially, there is no reason for me to go off the rocker or whatever you want to call it. And so I didn't call this person back for probably 4 hours later because I wanted to be sure that no emotions, I wasn't angry, I had thought through it. Like, I'm one of those that I have to plan what I'm going to say. And I have to think through any of the questions that might come up so that I can keep myself under control. Now, I might be making it sound like I'm this crazy person and I just fly off the handle. I can. It's not really, and I hate being that way. And so I've really worked hard on not allowing my emotions to get the best of me. But even before we started this video, there was some emotions. So Mike and I, we had a little bit, but we're okay now, right? Are you okay with me?
Yeah. So that brings us to point number 3, faith first.
Yeah.
So some of you might be thinking, Mike, you haven't really told me what to do about court orders. You're not listening if you think that. Okay, I've already told you what to do about court orders. I would never tell you to break the law.
No.
You're going to have to do what you got to do within your own household, but you're going to have to do it in a manner that puts your marriage first. You've heard us say that a million times. Marriage first. Marriage first, marriage first, marriage first. Okay, whatever you got to do to put the marriage first, do it. Because your marriage is a representation of Christ and his bride. Okay? And unfortunately, I mean, God's had to deal with wayward sons, not his son, but you look at all of the Old Testament, and I mean, there was a lot of that where they're like, God, what am I going to do with my son? And so he sent his son. But the whole point is, I digress, sorry. The whole point is faith first. You've got to put your trust in God. If you're allowing this to tear the marriage apart, you're not putting your trust in God, you're putting your trust in men. You're expecting your spouse to do something. The spouse is expecting you to do something, and nobody's talking to each other because of all these unspoken expectations.
Okay, another thing to think about here is your current marriage is a new way for you to show your children what a good marriage looks like, right? And so if you think of it that way, then your spouse has to be the number one priority. Because in your last marriage, there were many things that happened that caused a divorce, correct? Mm-hmm. And in that divorce, the children were hurt. And so what we always did was we were like, okay, first time was a nightmare, but this time we're going to do everything we can to make sure that between us, our kids are seeing what a good marriage looks like. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't do everything perfect. We're not telling you to be perfect, but we worked very hard, and that was our goal. Our goal was to show our children with the way that we treated each other, talked to each other, parented together, didn't allow them to tear us apart, because the kids will. If you haven't experienced that yet, just wait. It's coming. They are coming for you. But in every single decision that we made, how we dealt with his ex, how we dealt with my ex, how we dealt with the ex-grandparents or the ex-in-laws, all of these things, we were showing our children how to be a Christian, how to be a healthy marriage. We didn't hit it out of the park 100% of the time, but I would say, well, what percentage would you give it?
Oh, that really depended on age and stage, depending on how old we were and what we were going through at the time. I'd say we hit it out of the park 70 to 80% of the time.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that those 20 to 30% weren't. Sometimes it was one thing that made up that 20 or 30%. Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was a series of things, but overall we were very intentional from the very beginning. And I think that's where a lot of you guys get off, is you're not being intentional. Mm-hmm. You're not having this discussion before you go to court. You're not having this discussion after court. You're not going to God in prayer. Maybe you're going to God in prayer, but how about you go and God to prayer together?
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to God in prayer together, but your spouse doesn't like what you have to say in prayer. Intentional. Intentional means we listen. Intentional means we then talk. All right? I mean, I'm not saying that, what is that saying that goes around now?
We listen and we don't judge.
I hate that. Hate that with a passion. Now, some of you are like, Mike, what's wrong with it? I just don't like it. It infers something that is not true. So what I'm telling you is be intentional in your listening and intentional in your talking. Not to the point where, okay, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. I'm not saying that. Not saying that. Mm-hmm. You need to think about that other person, but that's why I'm saying be intentional as to what's coming out of your heart, because that which fills the heart, we all know what that says. Okay?
That's a good point. So, yeah. And I really like that point, because sometimes we have to clean our hearts. And I don't really like that term, but it's the only way I can at this moment think of to really, say what I'm trying to say. Sometimes our hearts get full of bitterness toward a church member or whoever, right? And we got to work hard and pray hard so that we can get rid of that and let it go. One thing that I've noticed in blended families is a lot of the times we keep all that hurt in there. We don't get rid of it. And it just builds and builds and builds. And that's why you have, a lot of the times, you have situations that get highly emotional really, really fast, is because you or the other person haven't spent the time to go through your heart, go through your actions and things that you're telling yourself or things that you think other people are thinking. That's a huge one. Get through there. And another thing about, putting your faith first, what are you showing your kids when you're like, well, I didn't expect this. You're in a blended family. So you may not have known exactly what the situations were going to be when you got married, but that doesn't matter. You're married. So let's make this marriage your best marriage.
And your last marriage.
Right.
Yes.
So anything else?
If you have questions that we can't answer, you feel free to, obviously you can pick up a copy of the book and keep watching because we're still working on it, but it's coming. The course, the Blended Family Momentum course on how to deal with these things. But we wanted to, once again, touch base on court orders. They suck. They suck. You know, but sometimes you just got to give that thing a big old hug and move right through it.
And remember, Satan is crafty. He is trying
no
to
dummy
tear.
there.
Yeah.
No dummy.
He is trying to tear your marriage apart because the more families that he can tear apart, the better it is. Because typically speaking, when you get your heart broke, do you want to serve God? A lot of the times people don't. And so, you know, withstand the attacks, but you got to stand together and be together. I'm not saying you have to agree on every single thing all the time because you're two totally different people.
Yeah.
And because opposites do attract, that's going to be a thing too. So just understand, you know, these things can work out to your best. I mean, we were talking about this not too long ago with someone, or maybe I was. You know, Mike and I didn't have a ton of friends when we were younger. Most of the people that we knew collectively, they went out and did things with each other, but we were never invited because we had kids. Okay, so we got kind of shifted off to the side. Well, at the time, it was very hard because we were like, why doesn't anybody like us?
Yeah.
And it wasn't about not liking us. It was about the fact that we had kids and they didn't. They were either engaged couples or they were married couples, and they didn't invite us because they didn't want a bunch of kids running around. And
Because it wasn't convenient for them.
We had 3. And so, you know, at the time it hurt. It hurt our feelings. It hurt my feelings especially, but it turned out so good for us because Mike and I learned from a very, very new in our marriage that we had each other. We didn't have other friends. We had some family members, but you know, to a certain degree, there was quite a bit of dysfunction in not our kids, but you know, other family members. And so we really didn't even have a ton of family. But that brought us so close. So at the time it hurt, and in the long run, it has helped us so much. And God is trying to help you. So whatever you're going through right now, I understand, you know, court dates and custody battles and all of these things can really cause your focus to go there instead of there. But it all starts when, you know, we can make something great out of something so small as like we did, had no friends. You know, that became a huge positive thing in our life. So just wanted to throw that in.
But I have nothing else.
Nothing else. Okay. So with that, we thank you so much for coming today. We hope that we answered your question that you had asked. And if you have further questions, you can put those down below, or you can even email us at help@blendedfamilymomentum.com. Now, I know a while back we had an email address. We were having problems with it. And so that was info. Excuse me. That was info@blendedfamilymomentum.com. But that's not the email address now. It's help. So with that, we thank you so very much for being here, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.